Hey, slave, send this to the cleaners.
Terry laughed smugly, making more insulting remarks toward me, and threw his discarded suit at me. It hit me, and the water spilled.
Oh no, clean that up. Hurry up and bring some fresh water, too.
Even though he was drunk, or instead because he was drunk, his true feelings came out. Terry thought of me as a slave. I threw the suit into the bag with all my might. That's when I noticed something sticking out of the suit pocket. I picked it up, and it made a crinkling sound as I unfolded the small, neatly folded paper. It's telling me to file it, so I'll go do it. Instead of wondering why this was there, I felt like it was a ticket to freedom. It felt like I could be free from all the frustration and resentment toward Terry. I immediately dashed out of the house. Then I submitted that divorce form to the city office. My name is Victoria. I'm 15 now, and I have 2 kids. My eldest daughter is Emma. Her younger brother is James. I never got along with my husband, Terry's parents, even when we were dating. They disliked me. But even so, I loved Terry and believed we could be happy together. My parents were worried about me and opposed our marriage, but I insisted and got married, practically eloping. Afterward, we rented a small apartment and started our life together. But Terry was unhappy that I had married him so hastily.
Did we really have to get married, even if it meant leaving our parents?
Terry would often grumble. However, there was a good reason why we rushed into marriage. Emma was already on the way. Of course, Terry knew this. My parents only opposed the marriage because Terry needed to properly introduce himself. But I'm not trying to blame Terry. I've got my own faults, and I've never been fond of his parents, who have always been nitpicky with me. Now, we should be focused on our child on the way, and we don't have time to dwell on the past or shift responsibility to each other. No matter how we think about it now, it's pointless. If we can find happiness, our parents will accept it too. I would always say that to calm Terry down. Even so, Terry would keep complaining, saying things like, "I wish we hadn't gotten married," or "You're not as good a cook as my mother." Having left home after eloping, I had nowhere to go, so I spent each day listening to Terry's remarks. Even Terry, though, was affectionate toward the kids.
Emma looks like Victoria, which is unfortunate, but James takes after me and is handsome.
He would often say that especially sweet to James, with a satisfied grin. He always had an unnecessary comment, but I knew he adored Emma too. His words ensured our children were the glue keeping us married, despite that. Terry was promoted to department head when the kids were in high school. By then, our relationship was far from good, and if no one else was around, we wouldn't even talk to each other. We were hanging on by a thread as a family, but Terry maintained an excellent public image and earned the trust of his employees. Once he had subordinates, he often brought them over. Among them were Mike and Mary, a male and a female colleague who visited frequently. After seeing them many times, I remembered their faces, and they treated me well.
Terry can focus on work because he has a wonderful wife like you.
Terry's juniors and colleagues would compliment him to boost his ego. "Oh, not at all," I'd reply.
Yeah, right. I could get divorced any time, but she won't leave.
Terry would joke one day, making me furrow my brow. A line that came straight from Terry. Hearing that made it clear to me that he meant it.
Come on, you're just joking. It's proof you two are close. I'm jealous.
But I forced a smile to match the colleagues, who thought it was a joke. Terry's laughter grated in my ears, and it made me furious. Flattered, Terry got carried away and, as usual, said things like, "My eldest son is handsome just like me, and I could have married a prettier wife, but I drew the short straw." He kept making comments to put me down and boost his own ego until he drank himself into a stupor and passed out. Afterward, his colleagues helped clean up. "I'm so sorry. You don't have to help."
No, it's fine. Terry always looks out for us.
They were considerate, even to me. As we were all cheerfully tidying up together, Mary spoke up.
Even though Terry said those things, he praises you at work.
"Really? That's hard to believe." I laughed and said. Mary continued,
He really does. He always says your family is super close. Even the boss is impressed.
"The boss?"
Yeah. The boss thinks family should be valued, and Terry always praises his family, so the boss says we should all look up to him. Jokes like that don't work without trust, you know?
Mary was clearly drunk and happily kept talking about Terry at work. "Well, that's good then." I forced another smile and muttered those words. We lost any sense of trust a long time ago. It quickly became apparent that Terry only said those things to make himself look good. I've heard that good liars mix a bit of truth into their lies. That's probably how Terry fooled everyone at work. I don't know whether it was natural or calculated, but I despised him then. I couldn't stand how he so effortlessly used our family for his gain. But our kids were still in school, and I wanted them to go to college. Just like Terry said, thinking of our kids kept me from divorcing him. Not that Terry had ever brought up divorce. We just went about our lives without causing waves. Despite everything, the kids grew up bright and honest. They worked hard at their studies. After graduating from a local college, Emma joined a nearby company and commuted from home. 3 years later, James, who had left home for college, also secured a job locally and decided to return home. I was genuinely happy that both kids were coming back. With both now working adults, I finally felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. And then I got more good news.
"Mom, I'm thinking about getting married."
Emma shared this with me in her 3rd year as a working adult. Her partner was a colleague named Ethan. He came to greet us and seemed like a good-natured young man who had apparently spent part of his childhood in France. He seemed very intelligent. Terry fully supported the marriage, and Emma immediately began preparing for the wedding. It would be a casual garden wedding. Wanting to make sure Emma's special day was perfect, I carefully chose my dress. I considered buying Terry a new suit, but he said he was okay with the one he already had. So I brushed it off and mended any loose threads, and I'm looking forward to the wedding with great anticipation. And then, on the wedding day itself, the weather was perfect, and the ceremony began surrounded by beautiful greenery and flowers. Mike and Mary, Terry's subordinates who had always been supportive and kind to Emma and James, attended the wedding, and I thanked them for coming. Afterward, at the reception, a standing party, I had a wonderful time greeting Emma's friends and co-workers. Terry seemed to be having a good time too, but after drinking too much as usual, He got carried away and started ordering me around. Hey, Victoria, give me some drinks. Servers were walking around the venue. He could have just looked around for help nearby, but instead, he called out to me from far away, which was incredibly embarrassing.
Victoria, I'll go.
Mike and Mary stepped in to cover for me and looked after Terry. Mary, in particular, stayed close to Terry like a wife. That sight felt off to me, but I was busy greeting other guests, so I left Terry to the two of them. It was a truly wonderful ceremony. The wedding ended without a hitch, and Mary stayed until the end to care for Terry, who was thoroughly drunk. The taxi arrives,
Terry, your taxi is here.
she said as she guided him into the car. I got in with him and thanked her. Thanks so much, Mary. Take care.
No, thank you. It's going to be a long night. Take care.
I took her words to mean that Terry was drunk and laughed. But she was looking at me, not Terry. I felt uneasy about it again, but I said goodbye to her and went home with Terry. James and Emma went to the after party, leaving us to head home alone as a couple. Terry felt better after a short nap in the taxi, so he walked into the house alone by the time we got home. Usually, we don't talk, but that night, Terry was more drunk than usual and couldn't stop talking.
We finally got her off our hands. I was worried since Emma takes after you, but I'm glad she managed to get married.
Terry sprawled out on the couch, putting me down like always.
Victoria, water?
He ordered me around as if he were my boss. With a sigh, I filled a glass and headed over to him. Here's your water. Your suit will wrinkle if you lie down, so take it off if you're going to sleep, I said, placing the glass on the table. Terry stood up, took off his suit jacket, and said,
You're instrumental, you know that. You do whatever you're told.
Useful? Just because you're drunk doesn't mean you can talk to me like that.
Hey, slave, make sure you send this to the cleaners.
Terry laughed smugly and made more insulting remarks toward me, throwing his discarded suit at me. It knocked over the glass of water.
Clean it up, hurry up, and bring me some fresh water.
Even though he was drunk, or rather, because he was drunk, his true feelings came out. Terry thought of me as nothing more than a slave. I couldn't contain my anger at his attitude and stood there frozen. But that rage didn't last long. As Terry snorted loudly on the couch, my feelings became shockingly numb. I realized I was becoming so indifferent to Terry that I felt neither love nor hatred toward him anymore. After that, I picked up the suit like another task. I found the pants lying around, probably taken off at some point, and picked them up too. When I took the suit to the bedroom and stood before the dry cleaning bag, my irritation flared up again. Seething angrily, I threw the suit into the bag as hard as possible. That's when I noticed something sticking out of the suit pocket. What's this? I muttered to myself as I reached for it. I unfolded the crinkled, neatly folded paper. Seeing what it was, I covered my mouth in surprise. I remembered Mary's words about it being a long night. I see, so that's what she meant. Realizing this, the corners of my mouth turned up instinctively. If this is here, I can file it, right? I could hear the excitement in my own voice as I spoke aloud. Right there in front of me was a single sheet of paper. The document that had fallen out of Terry's suit pocket was, in fact, a completed divorce form. He had already filled in his part. Yeah, I'm sure of it. It tells me to file it, so I'll do it. Instead of wondering why this was there, I felt like it was a ticket to freedom. It felt like I could be free from all the frustration and resentment toward Terry. It was only 8 p.m., and the dry cleaner was still open. Grabbing the suit and the divorce form, I dashed out the door. I dropped the suit off at the cleaners and headed straight to the city office. Here you go. I handed the signed form with a smile at the 24-hour counter and returned home. After that, I quickly packed my things. I took only what I needed and left the house, glancing sideways at Terry, still snoring loudly. I stayed at a hotel that night, soaking in a big bath and sleeping soundly in a plush bed until morning. But the following day, my phone had multiple missed calls. All of them were from Terry. How long had it been since we last spoke on the phone? We would usually text if we needed something. I was surprised that my number was still saved on Terry's phone. Hello.
Where are you?
As I was thinking about this, my phone rang again. Reluctantly, I answered the phone, and Terry said that in a panicked voice. He must have been shocked to wake up and find me gone. After all, the spilled water was still there. It was enough to make him notice that something was off at home. Where? I'm at a hotel.
A hotel? We came back together, didn't we? The water is still spilled. Your clothes are gone. What's going on?
From his words, it is evident that he needed to remember what he said yesterday. I sighed and replied, "The suit you told me to send to the cleaners contained a completed divorce form. I figured you wanted me to file it, so I did."
What? What do you mean?
What do I mean? I mean exactly that. I filed the divorce form, so we're strangers now. Thanks for everything. As I said, Terry began yelling on the other end of the line.
What? How dare you do this without my permission? Do you even know what you've done?
His reaction surprised me, and I was taken aback. But it didn't bother me, no matter how much Terry raged on the other end of the phone. Why so noisy this early in the morning? I'm heading to the breakfast buffet now. Bye. There's nothing in the house for him to eat. No bread or cereal. Today, Emma and Ethan are staying at the hotel gifted to them by the wedding venue, and James probably drank late into the night, so he will be up in the afternoon. Terry is probably panicking alone at home with nothing to eat. Thinking about that, I savored a delicious breakfast. After breakfast, I immediately headed to a real estate agency to look for an apartment. I didn't have time to be picky. I needed to find a place I could move into quickly, and as luck would have it, I could secure an apartment just a few doors down from Emma's new home. Moreover, the real estate agency was looking to hire a part-time employee. I found a home and job that day and was very grateful to that company. On my way back to the hotel, I got a call from James.
Mom, where are you? Dad's making a fuss.
I'd ignored Terry's calls, so he probably forced James to wake up and call me instead. His voice still sounded sleepy, like he hadn't fully woken up. The truth is, I divorced your dad. I'm leaving the house, so take care.
What? Out of nowhere? What's going on?
James seemed shocked at what I said. In any case, I need to explain things to the kids clearly so that they understand. I decided to call Emma that day and explain everything at the house.
Why did you call us so suddenly?
Emma sounded worried, which was understandable. And that's understandable. She was on top of the world yesterday and was called home today. She wasn't a child, so she sensed this wasn't just a casual chat. I felt sorry for her, but raising my kids was over now. Being a parent is forever, but wanting to live as a free person and not be anyone's slave isn't a bad thing. Even though I knew this logically, I still couldn't shake the guilt toward my kids.
Why are you suddenly getting divorced?
Divorced?
Emma and James each asked me in disbelief, while Terry jumped in to seize the opportunity.
Unbelievable, right? Help me convince your mother.
Terry played the victim, even though this was his own mess. If this kept up, it would be 3 against 1. I at least wanted my kids to understand that this divorce wasn't just me being selfish. I only filed the divorce form your dad had already filled out. He was the one who had prepared it, so why make me the villain? At my words, Emma and James turned to look at Terry. His eyes darted nervously as he scrambled for an excuse.
Villain? No way. That was just a joke, right? Who would actually file something like that?
A joke. Do you know how exhausted I've been from those jokes all this time? Terry faltered at my outburst. Emma and James both clammed up and glanced at each other. And for a joke, it sure looked pretty well prepared to me. It seemed like it was meant to convince someone. Terry's face flushed bright red as he spat out a rebuttal. His panic was so evident that Emma and James immediately knew something was up. I couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous he looked. You don't have to try so hard. You're just admitting it's true.
What? You set me up?
You only got mad because my guess hit too close to home. After listening to us go back and forth, Emma cautiously asked,
What do you mean?
Hearing that, I decided to tell them everything. You're not kids anymore, so you deserve to know. Your dad and Mary are seeing each other.
No, what are you talking about?
Terry turned pale this time and stood up. Emma and James initially looked shocked, but then turned scornfully toward Terry. I knew something was off. They were more physically affectionate than before, and their relationship didn't seem like just a boss and subordinate. Even when he said he envied our happy family, I started sensing an insincerity.
No, that's not.
You talk about how happy we were, but it always felt condescending. A woman's intuition is rarely wrong. Terry broke out into a nervous sweat and stayed silent, unable to come up with any excuses. It was still only a suspicion, but Terry's behavior confirmed it. While it was a shock, the betrayal hurt more than any feelings of love, which kept me grounded. But more than anything, my role as a mother helped me keep my composure.
I'm sorry, Mom, for inviting that woman to the wedding.
Emma said through tears. Terry looked pained by her words, but he had no right to be upset, and Emma didn't need to feel responsible. I only realized for sure yesterday, Emma. This isn't your fault. I encouraged Emma while saying that. James watched us, sighed deeply, and then turned his gaze toward Terry.
I knew you and Mom weren't close, but this is too much.
Terry's voice shook pathetically at James's obvious disdain.
It couldn't be helped. She kept pressuring me to get a divorce and said that she had to be at Emma's wedding to be convinced, so I had to invite her, and a divorce form.
You used me.
She said she'd tell the boss about the affair if I didn't.
My fists trembled with anger. After our divorce, she wanted to be Terry's next wife and become Emma's stepmother. That's why she insisted on being at the wedding. So he reluctantly invited her and completed the divorce form to prove his intentions.
I really wasn't planning on divorcing you, I swear.
Sure, I believe you. You weren't planning on letting go of your slave, were you?
What are you saying? I'd never think like that.
Terry desperately tried to convince me, but James muttered,
But Dad, you always used to say that marrying a woman who listens to everything you say, like Mom, would make life easier.
What?
Even though you always put Mom down, you didn't divorce her because that's how you felt, right?
I stood up at those words. Do I have any reason to stay as this man's wife? Both James and Emma shook their heads firmly.
Mom, you deserve to be free now.
Yeah, you do. And no matter what, you'll always be our mom, even if you won't be married to Dad anymore.
Emma wiped away her tears and chuckled through her nose as she said that. After that, we left the house. James didn't want to stay with Terry, so he moved to my apartment. The divorce papers had already been filed. We'll need to handle the division of assets reasonably, but I was relieved to finally put some distance between myself and Terry. A month later, one of Terry's subordinates showed up at the real estate agency where I'd started working. It was Mike.
Hey, aren't you Victoria, Terry's wife?
Mike, thanks for your help at Emma's wedding. What brings you here today?
I broke up with my girlfriend, and I figured a fresh start might be nice. So I'm looking for a new place.
Mike smiled awkwardly and sat down in front of me. Really? I see. I'd heard Mike mention his girlfriend a few times. He seemed to care deeply about her, but things didn't work out. I wanted to cheer him up, so I greeted him with a smile. We settled on a potential new place, but it was currently lunch break. The person overseeing viewings was away handling other appointments, so Mike booked a viewing for another day.
By the way, how long have you been working here? Terry didn't mention anything about that.
Oh, really? We got divorced.
What? But last week, during dinner with the boss, Terry talked about planning a couple's vacation.
Mike was stunned. I was surprised too. Is he still making such empty promises? He'll keep using the family to cozy up to the boss if left unchecked. I decided to tell Mike everything.
Terry and Mary. That's impossible.
Mike went pale. His reaction was strange. He slowly spoke up.
My girlfriend was Mary.
Mary. I couldn't help but gasp. I never imagined that Mary and Mike had been dating. Mike muttered, "Unforgivable." I watched him quietly.
Victoria, I can't forgive them. I'm going to tell the boss about this.
His determined gaze made me nod in agreement. I felt the same way. I refused to let Terry use me for his own benefit again. Mike left the store, saying he'd arranged the viewing again. I'd given him my contact information at Emma's wedding, so I was sure he'd be in touch soon. That evening, after work, he reached out to me.
Victoria, I told the boss.
His cheerful voice, so different from earlier that day, made me smile.
The boss was furious. He was livid that they'd betray their families and cheat with a subordinate. Both of them will face consequences.
Really? That's great. Now, they won't be using us anymore.
Those two deceived their families, the employees, and the boss. After I spoke with the boss, I was called into his office.
I imagined the scene and couldn't help but grin. Even though they were no longer a part of my life, the thought of Terry and Mary getting off scot-free had always felt wrong. Thank you, Mike. I'm sure you'll find happiness. I told him that. It felt like the kind of thing I wanted someone to say, too. In the end, word of Terry and Mary's affair quickly spread throughout the company. Terry had always claimed that he had a happy marriage and family, but once the truth came out, people saw him as a scumbag who'd taken advantage of his subordinate. He was demoted 3 levels, from department head to entry-level employee. No family is waiting for him at home anymore. It'll be interesting to see how a man in his 50s will live from here on out. Mary seems to have quit, worried about how others perceive her. I believe she was 35 years old. She's a pitiful woman who, in her mid-30s, ended up jobless after going after a married man. I heard her relationship with Terry ended too. A toxic relationship like that won't last long. Mary tried crying to Mike, but he firmly turned her away, and she felt relieved afterward. Seeing him like that gave me a sense of relief, too. Since then, I've been living peacefully in my apartment with James. 2 years have passed, and James announced his engagement to me. When I thought I'd finally be alone, he said, "Mom, come live with us too." Now, I live with James and his wife, eagerly awaiting the birth of my grandchild. Emma is also working hard as a mother, and I'm overjoyed to see my family grow. To let my elderly parents know about the divorce, I reached out to them after a long time. They said I should bring the kids to visit soon, and I'm endlessly grateful and sorry for them. I want to make up for my past mistakes by being a good daughter to my parents moving forward, and I also want to stay close to my kids and be a supportive mother they can always rely on.